Hi ladies and gentlemen, and Krzysztof the Polish Geek welcomes you to another movie review. A review of the newest Smurfs movie, which was pretty underwhelming, although I'll say this, it's certainly not the trash that some critics make it out to be. I actually think there were quite a few enjoyable moments in this movie, and there were times where I was actually pretty entertained, especially during the middle act of the movie, as the ending especially felt pretty cliche and predictable. I mean, the whole movie was predictable, but then again, it's a kids movie, so what do we expect from that? But the first thing I'll talk about though is my experience with the Smurfs, because as a kid, I grew up on the Smurfs Saturday morning cartoon from the 80s, actually. I mean, I'm a 90s kid, I was born in the 90s, but there were plenty of reruns because the Smurfs were very popular in Poland as a kid, so yes. Throughout my childhood, the Smurfs cartoon is one of the ones I watched quite a lot. Although it's more like Monday evening cartoon here in Poland, because I remember it being shown on Monday evenings, even if it's technically a Saturday morning cartoon. And I remember how I was looking forward to each Monday to just see another episode of the Smurfs, because yes, as a kid, not only I watched them a lot, I really loved the Smurfs Saturday morning 80s cartoon. And I did watch a few episodes just to refresh my memory, and I have to say, I still have some nostalgic fondness for the Smurfs, even if objectively it's very much a cartoon for kids. I mean, it's still pretty enjoyable when you watch it, and certainly a perfect cartoon to watch with your kids if you have, but as I said, overall, it's pretty much for kids first and foremost. And the same thing I would say about this movie, even though it does very much feel like the writers of this movie are not really familiar with the Smurfs. It feels like they just watched several of the episodes from the cartoon and then they decided to basically just create their own story using the concept and all these characters, because they created lots of things that were decidedly not in the cartoon, and I suppose they were not in the original comics either. Like, for example, Papa Smurf having two brothers, that certainly was not in the comics, or that the Smurfs are revealed to be descendants of some Guardians of Light. That certainly wasn't in the cartoons. So, yep, they're creating lots of lore that isn't necessarily bad, but certainly not related to the Smurfs. And then the weirdest part is that the main villain is not Gargamel, but his much more evil brother Razamel, who was also not in the cartoons, and I suppose not the comics either. And as I said, he's much more ruthless and evil than Gargamel, but sometimes his personality felt more like the ripoff of Gargamel's godfather, Lord Balthazar. And sometimes I wonder, why didn't they just use Lord Balthazar as a villain? He'd be such a better villain than a newly created Gargamel's brother Razamel. Like Lord Balthazar was always much more evil than Gargamel, and so yeah, I think he would be much better choice as a villain. That way they would use someone already familiar to the Smurfs lore while still having a much more evil villain than Gargamel, because even as a kid I always felt like Lord Balthazar was a much more evil and much better villain than Gargamel. So why couldn't they just use him? But oh well. And then the middle act really was the best part of the movie, because then the Smurfs get transported to the real world, to Paris actually, and the way the story blends the animation and the live action parts was actually pretty cool. And I actually kind of like the part of Razamel having his castle in the middle of the real world in live action, but then everything being animated inside his castle and the Smurf village. I actually like that. That I thought was pretty creative. And then him ordering fast food, including French fries, burgers, that also was pretty cool. So yes, which is all in the middle act of the movie. So yes, the middle act I'd say was the best part, even though I'm still confused again, why didn't they just made Lord Balthazar the main villain. And I also have to compliment the animation. The animation is actually pretty good and so nice and clean looking. So yes, I really like the animation of this movie as well. And the another thing I have to talk about is that, yes, Smurfs also kind of fell a victim to identity politics, because, at least it seems so at first, because they turned Smurfette, the sole female Smurf, into a girl boss, because the Smurfette from the 80s cartoon that I grew up on, she was decidedly not that. In fact, she felt like this sweet girl that just like everyone likes, while she's so innocent and naive. But again, here they did turn her into a bossy girl boss. Although, and I did not like her at first, but I'm glad that at least she did turn out pretty nice at the end and pretty supportive of her male companion. So there is that. Admittedly though, this is pretty much to be expected in modern Hollywood. It still wasn't as cringy as I expected it to be, and at the end, as I said, it actually turned out to be quite alright with that. So there is that. But overall, I have to say that I actually enjoyed the Smurfs far more than I expected to. But this is decidedly made very much for American audiences and for kids, pretty much. Certainly not for Smurfs purists. As I said, I really loved the Smurfs 80s cartoon as a kid, but I'm an adult now, so it's no big deal to me. At the end of the day, I think this is a movie that kids will very much enjoy. So if you have kids, then you might take them with you, because again, this is overall, I think, a movie that mostly kids will enjoy. And there are some enjoyable moments for adults as well, so there is that. Okay, so thank you ladies and gentlemen for checking out this movie review. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you then, bye.